Welcome to Zoe Stories. Paid to be a girl for one night. What happened shocked me. The evening had started like any other. I was sitting in my small apartment, the dim glow of the lamp casting soft shadows across the room, a mug of lukewarm coffee in my hands. The hum of the city outside was a distant reminder that life was happening, but inside these four walls, I had my secret sanctuary. My name is Jake, a 26-year-old marketing analyst with a perfectly ordinary life by day and an extraordinary secret by night. I had never told anyone, not my friends, not my colleagues, and definitely not Isabella, my girlfriend of 3 years, though she had unknowingly become an integral part of it. Cross-dressing wasn't something I had chosen lightly. It wasn't merely a whim or a passing curiosity. It was a deep, thrilling part of who I was. There was a certain liberation in slipping into a persona that society would never accept from me otherwise. My closet held pieces of a life that the world didn't know existed. Soft skirts in pastel shades, delicate blouses with lace trims, thigh-high stockings that whispered against my skin, and shoes that elevated not just my height, but my confidence. Every item was a promise of transformation, a ticket to a world where I could express myself without the heavy cloak of judgment. Despite this secret life, my reality during the day was rigid and structured. Work demanded efficiency, appearance, and a sense of composure I had mastered to a near art form. Marketing meetings, client presentations, deadlines, it all required a version of me that could navigate scrutiny without a single crack. And yet, when night fell, I became someone else entirely. Not fake, but freer, more aligned with the parts of me that I had hidden for so long. My relationship with Isabella added a delicious tension to my secret. She was everything I admired, sharp, witty, and confident, with a laugh that could illuminate the darkest room. She loved teasing me about my obsession with fashion, never realizing the layers of truth behind my words. It wasn't that I was ashamed. I just couldn't risk her judgment, nor the judgment of the world, discovering what brought me true joy. It had to remain hidden, carefully compartmentalized, a delicate secret tucked away behind smiles and casual conversation. On this particular evening, I found myself scrolling through an online forum dedicated to cross-dressers seeking opportunities for discreet gigs, paid experiences where one could explore their persona in safe, controlled environments. The idea of being compensated for something I already loved was tempting, but there was a thrill in the risk, too. One post caught my eye. Paid to be a girl for one night. Discreet, professional. Serious inquiries only. My heart skipped a beat. This wasn't just a fantasy anymore. This was a challenge, a dare, and an invitation all at once. The thought of stepping fully into the role, being observed, and yet being praised for it sent shivers down my spine. My fingers hovered over the reply button, hesitating, imagining the scenario in vivid detail. I pictured the transformation itself, the selection of the outfit, the careful application of makeup, the subtle art of adjusting stockings and heels so that each movement felt natural, effortless. The thrill of seeing my reflection, the sharp contrast between the man in my day-to-day life and the woman who stared back from the mirror, it was intoxicating. I imagined the feeling of my curls brushing against my cheeks, the delicate weight of earrings swaying with each motion, and the soft click of heels against the floor that would make every step a statement. There was excitement, yes, but also fear. What if someone saw me? What if Isabella came home unexpectedly? My pulse quickened as the scenarios played out in my mind, each possibility a mixture of exhilaration and dread. Despite the nervous flutter in my chest, I couldn't ignore the allure. The thought of earning money while indulging in my secret passion was irresistible. It was one of those rare opportunities where desire and practicality intertwined, where I could justify indulgence with reason. I took a deep breath, telling myself that this was just a single night, a controlled experiment, a safe way to test the boundaries of my secret life. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that this choice would ripple beyond that one night, that it might reveal parts of myself I hadn't confronted before. As I closed the laptop, the hum of the city seemed louder, more insistent, echoing the tension building inside me. My apartment, usually my safe haven, felt charged with potential. I glanced at the mirror above the dresser, half expecting to see the woman I could become looking back at me, smiling knowingly. Instead, it reflected the man I had to leave behind for the night, the man who would step into heels, skirts, and makeup for the thrill and the payment. A shiver of anticipation ran down my spine, a blend of excitement, fear, and curiosity. This was the beginning of something I couldn't quite predict, a night that promised transformation, tension, and perhaps revelation. I poured another cup of coffee, my mind racing with preparations. The outfit had to be perfect, the makeup flawless, the persona convincing. I rehearsed silently, imagining every gesture, every glance, every whispered word that would define the character I would become. Isabella's voice echoed in my memory, teasing, playful, unaware that her presence was both a comfort and a threat to my secret. I knew the stakes, I knew the risks, but the pull was irresistible. The night awaited, and with it, a transformation that would challenge boundaries, explore identity, and ignite a suspenseful journey that neither I nor the audience would forget. The moment I decided to take the gig, a surge of adrenaline shot through me. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I stared at the closet, my fingers brushing against the soft fabric of skirts and blouses I had long kept hidden. Tonight wasn't just another evening in my apartment. It was a full immersion into a world I rarely allowed myself to enter. Each piece of clothing felt like a key, unlocking a persona I had practiced in secret but never tested under scrutiny. My pulse quickened at the thought, part fear, part excitement. I carefully selected a knee-length skirt in a muted lavender hue, paired with a silky blouse that hinted at softness without being overly revealing. The textures, the way they fell against the skin, the sound of the fabric brushing with every movement, they all mattered. I wanted authenticity, a convincing illusion that someone else could admire and perhaps be captivated by. Then came the accessories, a thin gold necklace, small hoop earrings, and a pair of nude heels that had become my favorite because they demanded both balance and poise. Holding them, I imagined how they would complete the transformation, how each subtle addition would make the character I was about to embody feel real, not just for others but for me. Sitting in front of the mirror, I started with my foundation. Each stroke of the brush on my skin was like painting a portrait, revealing contours and shadows that softened my masculine features. The contouring was subtle but precise, sculpting cheekbones and jawline into angles that the lighting would flatter. The blush added warmth, giving life to the cheeks that I often felt lacked softness. Every step was ritualistic, a delicate choreography of brushes and fingers that required both patience and focus. The mirror reflected a face in flux, neither fully the man I had been during the day, nor yet the woman I was becoming, but it was enough to make my heart race. Mascara and eyeliner followed, each application amplifying the size of my eyes, making them look wider, more expressive. I paused repeatedly, stepping back to examine the effect, adjusting the strokes, blending the edges. The wig was next, a cascade of soft waves in a chestnut shade that framed my face perfectly, masking angular features while adding a touch of sophistication. As I placed it carefully, securing it with pins, I felt the thrill of transformation wash over me, mingling with a knot of anxiety in my stomach. The person I saw in the reflection was daring, bold, and entirely different from the one who had left work hours ago. Yet with excitement came fear. The thought of anyone, walking through the door unannounced made my hands tremble slightly. I imagined Isabella returning early from a late dinner, opening the door, and seeing me like this. My pulse spiked at the thought, and I forced myself to breathe deeply. No, this was controlled. I had rehearsed everything in private countless times. Every gesture, every posture, every word had been practiced. Tonight, I had to execute flawlessly. I reminded myself of the payment, the validation, the thrill that outweighed the fear. This was not just indulgence, it was a test of courage and identity. Once fully dressed, I walked across the apartment, the click of my heels echoing slightly on the wooden floor. Each step demanded careful balance, a controlled sway of the hips that felt foreign yet empowering. I ran a hand along the skirt's hem, feeling the fabric glide over my thighs, and imagine the effect it would have on someone observing me. Every detail mattered. The tilt of my head, the expression in my eyes, the subtle way I adjusted my necklace. This was performance art, and I was the solo artist, rehearsing before the curtain rose. As the night deepened, I considered my strategy. If someone came in unexpectedly, could I respond naturally? Could I maintain composure and charm under scrutiny? The thought of failure lingered in the back of my mind, sharp and insistent. I thought of Isabella again, her laughter, her teasing, the way she often commented on my fashion experiments. What if she noticed the difference, the confidence in my posture, the softness in my voice? Fear twisted in my stomach, but excitement smoldered alongside it. The balance between risk and thrill was intoxicating, and I realized I had never felt so alive. I paused in front of the mirror, practicing subtle expressions, a shy smile, a knowing glance, a playful tilt of the head. Each nuance was a test of my ability to inhabit this persona completely. I examined the way the wig fell across my shoulders, the shimmer of the blouse in the soft light, the subtle curve the heels forced into my posture. The transformation was nearly complete, yet every detail had to be perfected. One misstep could break the illusion, unraveling not just the night's plan but the careful identity I had nurtured in secret. Finally, I took a deep breath and stepped back from the mirror. The room felt different now, charged, alive, expectant. I could almost hear the applause of an imaginary audience, or the sharp intake of breath from someone witnessing the transformation. The thrill of anticipation mingled with the tension of secrecy, creating a heady cocktail of emotions that left me simultaneously nervous and exhilarated. Tonight, I would step fully into a world I had long imagined. Tonight, I would be someone else entirely, and yet, somehow, I would remain me. The journey was just beginning, and the first steps were already intoxicating. With the first steps of the transformation complete, I turned my focus to the finer details, the subtle elements that could make or break the illusion. I perched on the edge of my bed, adjusting the padding I wore beneath the skirt to create a more natural curve at the hips. The sensation was strange, a constant reminder that my body was now a canvas to be shaped, molded, and performed. I ran my hands over the contours, checking angles in the mirror, imagining how they would appear to a stranger. The thrill of becoming someone else intensified with every adjustment, yet an undercurrent of fear lingered, whispering that one mistake could unravel everything. Next came the shoes. I had always loved heels, but tonight they carried a heightened significance. As I slipped my feet into the nude pumps, I felt my posture shift instantly, my legs elongating, my spine straightening, my confidence rising with a click of each step. Walking across the apartment, I focused on balance, on the slight sway of my hips, on the subtle grace that heels demanded. Each motion reminded me of the duality of the night ahead, the simultaneous exhilaration and vulnerability of presenting myself as someone I was not, yet deeply wanted to be. Then there was the makeup, a ritual I had perfected over months of practice, but tonight it had a new weight. I applied eyeliner with precision, tracing delicate lines that accentuated the natural shape of my eyes, followed by mascara that lengthened my lashes and added a hint of drama. Blending eyeshadow was a delicate process, layering colors to create depth without overdoing it. I paused repeatedly, scrutinizing every detail in the mirror, adjusting, blending, perfecting. The reflection staring back at me was simultaneously familiar and foreign, a woman with soft features, wide expressive eyes, and a subtle smile that I hadn't seen on myself before. I felt a shiver of both triumph and trepidation. The wig was next, a cascade of chestnut waves that framed my face perfectly, softening my jawline and adding an effortless elegance. I carefully pinned it into place, testing its balance with small head movements. The sensation of the wig against my skin was exhilarating, a tactile reminder that the transformation was no longer just visual. It was physical, sensory, and immersive. Every brush of hair against my cheeks heightened my awareness of this new identity, and a thrill ran through me that was equal parts excitement and fear. I was stepping into someone else entirely, yet the echoes of Jake remained beneath the surface. As I examined the final touches, the necklace resting delicately at my collarbone, the subtle shimmer of my earrings, the perfect alignment of the blouse, I felt my heartbeat accelerate. The apartment, usually quiet and unassuming, seemed charged with anticipation. Shadows flickered under the dim lamp, casting dramatic shapes across the room, and every creak of the floor heightened the suspense. I imagined an unexpected visitor stepping through the door, seeing me like this, and my stomach tightened. The stakes were high. One slip could expose me, unraveling the carefully constructed illusion and revealing my secret life. I paused to practice expressions. A shy smile, a playful glance, a tilt of the head, all rehearsed meticulously. Each nuance carried meaning, confidence, flirtation, subtle vulnerability. I adjusted my posture again, walking back and forth to feel the rhythm of my body in these new clothes. There was a delicate balance to maintain. Too stiff, and the persona would appear unnatural. Too relaxed, and the illusion could falter. I imagined the client or observer watching, assessing every movement, and the tension sharpened, mixing with the excitement that had driven me to accept this one-night venture. Then came the moment I dreaded most, the voice. Speaking in a softer, slightly higher tone than usual, I rehearsed casual sentences aloud, imagining dialogue with a stranger. The sound of my own voice felt strange, yet surprisingly convincing. I laughed lightly, testing the sound, the cadence, the way it rolled off my tongue. Each word was a careful negotiation between authenticity and performance, a subtle dance that required precision and confidence. Even in solitude, I felt the pressure mounting, the awareness that this transformation demanded every ounce of focus I could muster. I took a step back, surveying the full reflection once more. The person staring back was confident, poised, alluring, a version of me that I had long imagined but never dared to fully inhabit in the open. The thrill was intoxicating, yet the anxiety remained. What if I faltered under scrutiny? What if a single gesture betrayed the man beneath the persona? The duality of excitement and vulnerability wrapped around me, a tight coil of anticipation that left my pulse racing. The night was still young, and the full challenge had yet to begin. Finally, I allowed myself a moment of reflection. The transformation was nearly complete, and the tension had built to a palpable intensity. Every detail, clothing, makeup, posture, voice, had been honed meticulously. The thrill of performance was intertwined with the fear of discovery, creating a heady mixture that left me both exhilarated and tense. I knew the next steps would push me further into this world, testing my courage, my skill, and my ability to maintain the illusion. The night promised danger, excitement, and revelation, and as I stood there, fully immersed in the persona I had crafted, I felt the first true stirrings of what this one-night experiment could unleash. By now, I was fully dressed, every detail perfected, yet the tension in the apartment had grown almost tangible. The thrill of the transformation was still there, but it was now interwoven with the anxiety of the night's upcoming challenge. I had rehearsed endlessly in private, but the thought of performing this persona for someone else, being paid to exist as a woman for one night, brought the stakes into sharp relief. My reflection in the mirror smiled back at me, confident, poised, alluring, but behind that smile, a tremor of nerves ran through my body. Could I maintain this facade flawlessly when confronted by another human being? I paced the apartment, heels clicking softly against the wooden floor, each step reminding me of the delicate balance required. A sudden creak of the radiator made my pulse spike. For a moment, I imagined Isabella walking through the door, her eyes widening in surprise. I pressed my palms to my chest, feeling the rapid flutter of my heartbeat, and forced myself to breathe slowly. The adrenaline sharpened every sense. The faint scent of the perfume I had dabbed on my wrist seemed almost intoxicating, the soft rustle of the skirt under my fingers a constant reminder of the persona I now inhabited. The anticipation of leaving the apartment was almost unbearable. I checked my reflection again, adjusting the wig that had slipped slightly, straightening the blouse, and making sure the heels were securely fastened. I had rehearsed how to walk, how to speak, even how to breathe, and yet the knowledge that someone else would soon see me like this created a cocktail of fear and exhilaration that was impossible to ignore. Every step toward the door was both a promise and a risk, a move into uncharted territory that could either exhilarate or expose me. I paused for a moment, imagining how the encounter would unfold. The client had been specific: discretion, confidence, authenticity. They wanted someone who could convincingly inhabit a female persona for the evening. My mind raced with potential scenarios. Would I be greeted warmly or tested with questions, observed for subtle tells that might betray the man beneath the makeup and clothes? The thought sent shivers down my spine. This was no longer just an experiment in secrecy. It was a test of skill, poise, and the ability to maintain control under scrutiny. As I stepped toward the door, I rehearsed the persona in my mind, practicing subtle gestures, adjusting my posture, and imagining the cadence of conversation. I ran through possible questions: how I would respond naturally, how I would laugh, nod, and maintain eye contact. Every detail mattered, and the anticipation made my hands clammy. I realized that the night was not merely about appearance. It was about performance, about inhabiting a role completely, convincingly, and without hesitation. Then the doorbell rang. My heart jumped into my throat, and I froze mid-step, listening intently. The sound echoed like a drumbeat through the quiet apartment, each chime a countdown toward exposure. I took a deep breath, reminding myself that this was what I had chosen, that the risk was part of the thrill. My hands trembled slightly as I moved to the door, gripping the handle firmly, steadying my breath, and imagining the persona I would project as soon as it opened. Opening the door revealed a neutral, professional figure holding a small envelope, the token of the evening's arrangement. Relief washed over me in a wave that was almost dizzying. I signed the acknowledgement, accepting the envelope with a polite smile, my voice pitched just right, soft yet confident. It felt surreal. The mundane exchange contrasted sharply with the magnitude of the transformation I had just undergone. The package contained a set of instructions and props, a small clutch to hold, subtle makeup touch-ups for later, and accessories that would reinforce the persona throughout the night. Each item was a tangible extension of the identity I was about to live for hours, increasing both the excitement and the tension. Alone again, I unpacked the contents carefully, laying each piece as if preparing for a stage performance. The clutch, simple yet elegant, seemed almost symbolic, a small vessel containing the power to control perception. I imagined slipping it into my hand later, the subtle shift in posture it would demand, the delicate grip that would complete the illusion. The instructions detailed expectations, movements, and behavior, emphasizing authenticity above all. Every line made my pulse quicken. I understood that tonight was not merely a dress-up. It was a challenge, a high-stakes performance where failure would carry personal, emotional consequences. I glanced at the mirror once more. The reflection staring back at me was flawless, yet it carried the weight of what was to come. My mind oscillated between confidence and fear, excitement and vulnerability. Could I sustain this persona under scrutiny? Could I navigate conversation, gestures, and subtle social cues without faltering? The thought of exposure, of being recognized, of having Isabella or anyone else walk in unexpectedly, added a sharp edge to the thrill. The suspense was electric, wrapping around me like a tangible force. To steady myself, I practiced subtle movements, walking across the apartment, adjusting the wig, smoothing the skirt, tilting my head just so. Each motion was deliberate, rehearsed, yet infused with the tension of anticipation. I whispered phrases to myself, testing tone, pitch, and inflection. The persona was no longer just a costume. It was an identity I had to inhabit completely, convincingly, and without hesitation. Every second that passed tightened the coil of excitement and anxiety in my chest, making the night ahead feel both inevitable and unpredictable. Finally, I took a deep breath and reminded myself of why I had accepted this challenge: for the thrill, the validation, the exploration of a hidden facet of myself. The transformation was not only physical, it was emotional, psychological, and social. Each movement, each glance, each gesture carried weight. The apartment, quiet and dimly lit, seemed to pulse with anticipation. The first part of the real challenge was about to begin, and I could feel the night pressing against me, filled with tension, suspense, and the promise of revelation. The apartment seemed smaller than usual now, every shadow and corner heightened in significance. I held the clutch tightly, my fingers brushing the smooth surface as if drawing courage from its weight. It wasn't just an accessory, it was a talisman, a small anchor keeping me tethered to the persona I was about to embody fully. The instructions in the envelope had been clear. Maintain composure, move gracefully, project confidence, and above all, stay convincing. I read through them again, each line sharpening my focus, while the room's dim light cast soft reflections across my carefully arranged ensemble. Every detail mattered tonight. A slight misstep could undo hours of preparation. I began pacing slowly, rehearsing movements I would need when the first visitor arrived. Walking in heels required concentration, subtle shifts of weight, careful placement of the feet to prevent any telltale wobble. I swayed my hips slightly, testing the natural flow, adjusting the wig as I passed by the mirror. My reflection stared back at me, a poised, elegant figure, entirely convincing. But beneath the surface, adrenaline surged, an invisible drumbeat of tension that refused to subside. The thrill of performing this persona in a real scenario mingled with the fear of exposure, creating a heady mix that left my chest tight and my pulse racing. I tried to calm myself, taking slow, measured breaths, but my mind raced ahead to every possible situation. An unexpected knock, a sudden sound from the street, Isabella returning home early, or even my own nerves betraying me mid-performance. Each possibility was a wave of suspense, riding alongside the excitement that had drawn me into this challenge. The duality was intoxicating. I was terrified yet electrified, vulnerable yet empowered. Tonight was no longer a rehearsal. It was a test of skill, courage, and control. Then it happened, the first real interruption. A soft knock echoed through the apartment. My heart skipped a beat. Was it the client arriving early? Or worse, someone who might compromise everything? I steadied my breathing and approached the door, clutch in hand, rehearsing the confident, natural demeanor I would need to project. Peering through the peephole, I saw a delivery woman holding a small parcel. Relief washed over me, though the tension remained, a taut string under my skin. I opened the door with a practiced smile, voice soft and steady. "Thank you," I said, taking the package and signing quickly. Even in this simple exchange, my heart thudded violently. Back inside, I carefully unpacked the contents, a delicate scarf, a pair of earrings, and a small mirror for touch-ups. Each item was chosen to enhance the persona, to add realism, to make my transformation more convincing. I laid them out meticulously, imagining the gestures I would use with each, draping the scarf just so, adjusting an earring with a flick of the wrist, checking the lips in the mirror without appearing self-conscious. Every movement became part of a choreography I had been rehearsing in my mind, yet the stakes now felt immediate and tangible. This wasn't just about appearance anymore, it was about presence, poise, and subtlety under pressure. I tested my voice again, whispering phrases softly to the empty room. Each sound felt strange, yet fitting, the cadence and pitch tuned to the persona I had created. I practiced laughter, light and airy, imagining it spilling over conversation in a natural, believable way. Then I moved on to gestures, tilting my head, crossing my legs, resting my hands lightly on my lap. Every micro-movement carried meaning, and I analyzed my reflection, adjusting until even the smallest detail felt authentic. The tension in my chest mixed with exhilaration. I was performing for an unseen audience, yet the suspense made every action feel immediate, critical. Minutes passed, each stretching longer than the last. I could almost feel the eyes of the night watching me, testing me, measuring my confidence. The apartment, quiet and dimly lit, became a stage. Shadows from the furniture danced across the walls as I moved, heightening the sense of anticipation. I imagined a knock at any moment, someone stepping in to observe, to judge, to see the persona I had constructed so meticulously. The suspense wrapped around me, tightening with every heartbeat. Yet alongside the fear was a thrill I hadn't felt in months, the intoxicating power of inhabiting someone else fully, even if only for a night. Then I heard it, a soft hum from the street below, footsteps approaching. My pulse quickened. I adjusted the skirt, checked the heels, straightened the blouse. Everything had to be perfect. The transformation was no longer about private indulgence. It was about navigating the world with poise, about projecting authenticity to anyone who might witness it. I imagined interactions, practiced subtle smiles, the tilt of my head, gestures of grace and confidence. Each rehearsal made the persona more convincing, but also increased the emotional weight. The knowledge that tonight could change the boundaries of who I was and how I perceived myself. Finally, I sat down, clutch resting lightly on my lap, and allowed a moment to soak in the transformation. The reflection in the mirror was flawless, poised, elegant, yet the tension remained taut beneath the surface. I was ready, but every sense remained alert, every nerve on edge. The night promised challenges, suspense, and the intoxicating thrill of fully becoming someone else. I realized that the first steps of engagement had begun, not just with props or appearance, but with the very act of inhabiting this persona, of stepping closer to the unknown, and facing the uncertainty that made every heartbeat so vividly alive. The apartment felt electric now, every sound magnified, every shadow exaggerated. My reflection in the mirror stared back at me, perfectly poised, flawlessly transformed, but beneath that polished exterior, my nerves were a live wire. I had rehearsed every gesture, every tilt of the head, every word and inflection, yet the anticipation of the night's real challenge tightened my chest and sent shivers through my body. This was no longer a private performance. Tonight, I would be observed, evaluated, and perhaps even judged. The thrill of that possibility mingled with the fear of exposure, creating a tension so intense it was almost tangible. I checked every detail one last time. The blouse was smooth, the skirt draped perfectly, the heels securely fastened. I brushed my fingers along the edges of the clutch, the subtle weight grounding me. Reminder that I could control the image I presented. The wig sat correctly, framing my face in soft waves, and the makeup had been meticulously adjusted for the perfect finish. Every element was in place, but the pressure of inhabiting the persona for the night, the fear of faltering even once, hung over me like a storm cloud, ready to break at any moment. A sudden knock at the door made my heart leap into my throat. My pulse spiked, each beat echoing in my ears. Could it be the client arriving early? Or worse, someone who might see through the facade? I steadied my breathing, adjusted my posture, and moved to the door with as much confidence as I could muster. Peeking through the peephole, I saw the silhouette of a stranger holding a small envelope, the symbol of the night's challenge. Relief surged through me, though the tension remained, taut as a drawn bow. I opened the door with a practiced smile, soft voice steady, and took the package. Every gesture had to be convincing. Any slip could unravel the hours of meticulous preparation. Inside, I unpacked the contents carefully. A small compact mirror, touch-up lipstick, a delicate bracelet, and instructions emphasizing discretion and authenticity. Each item was a tool, a prop, a key to maintaining the illusion. I ran my hands over them, imagining how I would use each in practice, adjusting the bracelet just so, checking my reflection subtly, reapplying lipstick with casual finesse. Every movement had to appear effortless, natural, yet carried the weight of precision. The suspense coiled tighter with every passing second, knowing that soon, someone would be observing, interacting, and testing the persona I had constructed. I moved through the apartment, rehearsing gestures again, crossing my legs, tilting my head, a soft laugh, a playful glance. Every microaction was deliberate, calculated to maintain the illusion, yet each carried a heightened emotional charge. The heels clicked softly on the floor, a reminder that my body had adapted to this new rhythm, but the fear of a misstep remained. I imagined the client watching, assessing, evaluating, and I felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. The stakes were high. Tonight, the persona I had nurtured in secret would face its first real-world test. Time seemed to stretch as I prepared mentally for the night. I ran through possible interactions, anticipating questions, practicing responses, and adjusting gestures. The suspense was a tangible presence, wrapping around me with every breath. I imagined the worst-case scenarios, slipping in the heels, a revealing comment, a gesture that would betray the man beneath the makeup and clothes. Yet alongside the fear was a thrill, the intoxicating power of inhabiting a persona completely, of stepping into a version of myself that was daring, confident, and undeniably alluring. Then, just as I was settling into the tension, a sudden sound from the street below made me jump. Footsteps approached, accompanied by muffled voices. The client was arriving, or perhaps someone else entirely. My palms grew clammy, the clutch felt heavier in my hands, and my reflection in the mirror seemed to stare back, as if questioning my readiness. Every movement, every expression had to be flawless. I practiced a casual tilt of the head, a subtle smile, a graceful adjustment of the skirt, each action an invisible rehearsal for the moment of interaction. Minutes felt like hours, and the suspense reached its peak. I positioned myself near the door, clutch in hand, body poised, every sense alert. The apartment, quiet for hours, now seemed alive with possibility. Each creak of the floorboards, each distant hum, each shifting shadow charged with anticipation. The persona I had created was ready, yet the tension, the thrill, and the fear of exposure created an emotional storm that left me trembling with adrenaline. Finally, the knock came again, firmer this time. The moment of truth had arrived. I took a deep breath, squared my shoulders, and opened the door. The figure standing there was real, observing, assessing, and the transformation I had rehearsed for so long would now be tested. The suspense, the meticulous preparation, the emotional tension, all converged into this instant. I stepped forward, smile in place, voice steady, every movement calculated. The night had begun, and the game of identity, performance, and risk was now fully in motion. Every second promised exhilaration, fear, and revelation, and I knew that the build-up had been just the first act of a night that would challenge every boundary I had known about myself. The door clicked shut behind the client, and suddenly the apartment felt impossibly small. Every shadow seemed sharper, every flicker of light from the lamp more dramatic. My reflection in the mirror, once a source of confidence, now felt like a distant reminder of the stakes. I gripped the clutch tighter, feeling the smooth leather bite into my palm. Every step I had taken in preparation, the makeup, the wig, the heels, had led to this moment, and yet nothing could prepare me for the intensity of real eyes scrutinizing me. The client, a poised woman with an air of measured curiosity, lingered near the doorway. She had a slight, amused smile, but her eyes scanned me with subtle calculation. "You look convincing," she said softly, and the word hit me harder than I expected. Convincing. Not flawless, not perfect, but convincing enough to pass initial judgment. My pulse spiked, and I forced a calm smile, letting my higher-pitched, practiced voice carry the words, "Thank you. I've prepared everything as requested." I felt my throat tighten for a moment, the persona I had built rising to the surface, masking the raw fear beneath. She stepped closer, her gaze sweeping over my outfit, the blouse's delicate draping, the skirt's precise fit, the subtle contouring of my body. My heels clicked softly on the hardwood floor as I moved with careful, deliberate grace. Each motion was scrutinized, evaluated. Every micro-expression had to feel natural, every tilt of the head, every adjustment of the clutch, every sway of the hips was a test. I could almost hear her silent assessment, every pause between words amplifying the tension. "Let's begin," she said finally, voice firm but encouraging. "I want you to act naturally, as if you're in a casual social setting. Respond, adapt, entertain." Show me you're not just playing a role. My chest tightened. The rehearsal in private had been one thing, but active interaction under observation was another level entirely. The stakes were no longer theoretical, they were immediate. My hands were slightly clammy, and the warmth rising in my cheeks reminded me that this was no longer a simple experiment. It was a performance under pressure, a challenge to my composure and control. I led her toward the small seating area, clutch placed delicately on my lap, heels clicking softly. Each movement had to be poised yet relaxed, deliberate yet casual. I practiced a subtle tilt of the head, a soft smile, gestures refined through countless hours of preparation. Every motion carried a dual weight, the confidence of the persona and the fear that the mask could slip at any moment. The suspense coiled tighter around me, a taut wire straining to snap. We sat facing each other, a small distance between us, and the client observed silently for a moment, as if measuring the authenticity of my posture, my expressions, my very presence. I felt like an actor on a stage where a single misstep could destroy the illusion entirely. My heart raced, but a part of me reveled in the intensity. This was the thrill I had been craving, the raw, intoxicating tension of inhabiting a persona completely and being judged in real time. She spoke again, testing me with casual questions, carefully gauging my responses. "Tell me about your day," she said, her eyes flicking up and down my body as if measuring the naturalness of my movements. I answered smoothly, voice controlled, carefully pacing my words. My gestures accompanied the conversation, a tilt of the head, a playful lift of the eyebrow, a subtle laugh. Each motion, each expression had to feel spontaneous, yet every second was calculated. The fear of faltering pushed my senses to hyper-alertness, heightening every emotion and physical reaction. Then came the first subtle test. She leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice, her eyes narrowing just a fraction. "How comfortable are you in this persona?" The question was simple but loaded. Comfort? The truth was far from simple. I felt exhilarated, exposed, terrified, and alive all at once. Yet I smiled, tilted my head with a practiced ease, and answered lightly, "I've grown accustomed to it over time. It's freeing in some ways." The response sounded casual, even charming, but beneath it, my body was trembling, adrenaline coursing through every nerve. A soft chuckle escaped her lips, the first sign of approval, and it ignited a dangerous confidence in me. I shifted slightly, crossing my legs with the precision I had rehearsed, adjusting the clutch, and letting my smile linger just long enough to feel natural. Every movement was a delicate dance between authenticity and performance, a tightrope walk over a pit of potential exposure. The suspense was relentless, the stakes invisible but heavy, and yet, paradoxically, thrilling beyond measure. The first part of the night's test was complete, but I could feel it. The tension had only begun. The client's measured observation, the subtle questioning, and the continuous scrutiny created an environment of suspense so thick it was almost tangible. Each moment heightened my awareness, forcing me to inhabit the persona fully, to balance fear with exhilaration, vulnerability with poise. I realized, with a shiver, that the real challenge was not the makeup or the clothes. It was maintaining control over my emotions, movements, and reactions while under constant observation. The air between us seemed charged with anticipation, every pause and glance carrying meaning. My reflection in the small mirror across the room caught my eye, a constant reminder of the duality I carried. Jake, the man behind the mask, and the persona I had crafted so carefully. Each had to coexist seamlessly, every second a performance, every gesture a negotiation between reality and illusion. And in that charged, silent space, I understood fully. The climax had begun, and the night would push me further than I had ever imagined. The conversation flowed, carefully measured, yet each word, each laugh, each tilt of my head felt like walking a knife edge. The client's eyes never left me, and I could sense her subtle tests, the way she lingered on certain gestures, the tiny shifts in her posture, the way she observed my hands resting lightly on my lap. Every detail of my transformation was being weighed, evaluated. A bead of sweat trickled down my temple, and I subtly wiped it away with the back of my hand, careful not to break character. Then came the first obstacle. A sudden knock echoed from the apartment door. Not the client, but someone else. My pulse spiked, and I froze mid-smile. Who could that be? I whispered under my breath, though it sounded normal in tone. The client glanced at me, amused but inquisitive. My heart raced. This was unexpected, unplanned. A neighbor? A delivery? Or worse, someone who might recognize me? The stakes shot up instantly. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my trembling hands, and moved with deliberate grace to the door, heels clicking softly. Peeking through the peephole, I saw a familiar silhouette. My neighbor, someone I had spoken to casually before. Relief washed over me in a sudden jolt, but only briefly. My heart still hammered as I realized the neighbor might notice subtle details: the wig, the makeup, the heels. One wrong glance, one raised eyebrow, and the illusion could shatter. I opened the door with a poised smile, adjusting my posture carefully. "Hey, I just received a package and wanted to drop it off," the neighbor said cheerfully, holding a small box. I took it with a soft, practiced voice. "Thank you so much." "That's very kind of you." My hands shook slightly, but I forced them to steady, sliding the package onto the counter. The neighbor gave a faint nod, unaware of the tension thrumming through me, and left. Closing the door, I exhaled slowly, but the adrenaline refused to fade. The client's eyes sparkled with subtle amusement, as if she sensed the ripple of chaos that had passed. "Impressive," she said quietly. "You handled that with grace." My chest heaved slightly, and I forced a calm, fluid nod, smiling naturally. The danger of exposure, the constant fear of being discovered, had sharpened every nerve, and yet the thrill of surviving it exhilarated me in equal measure. But the challenge had only begun. The client now instructed me to move beyond sitting, to interact as if I were at a social gathering. I had to entertain, charm, and adapt dynamically. My legs ached slightly from the heels, and my hands trembled faintly, but I straightened my back and allowed the persona to dominate. Each gesture had to appear effortless, casual, spontaneous. I sipped from a glass of water, held it delicately between my fingers, tilted my head, and laughed softly at her light remarks, all while my pulse pounded fiercely beneath my skin. Then another twist. The client casually placed a small mirror on the table, saying, "I want to see how you maintain composure under reflection." Imagine an audience watching from all sides. My eyes flickered to the mirror, and I felt a rush of vulnerability. My reflection multiplied, two versions of myself staring back: Jake, tense and fearful, and the persona I had created, poised and confident. The duality was dizzying. For a moment, my confidence faltered, and I had to remind myself to breathe, to steady my trembling hands, to recalibrate every gesture. The client's subtle smile reminded me that observation never paused. Every blink, every tilt of my head, every laugh was scrutinized. The suspense intensified as she began asking personal, probing questions. "How does it feel to inhabit this persona fully?" she asked, leaning slightly forward, voice soft but penetrating. I hesitated fractionally, heart hammering, before responding with practiced calm. "It's liberating, in a way. Challenging, but empowering." The words were true on some level, but layered beneath was fear, vulnerability, and the knowledge that one misstep could reveal everything. The night pressed on, each moment a test of endurance and composure. I moved from seating area to small table, adjusting the clutch, straightening the wig, reapplying lipstick subtly. Every action was a dance of control versus exposure, and each minute magnified the suspense. My body ached slightly from the heels, yet the emotional tension outweighed any physical discomfort. I was hyper-aware of every sound: the hum of the radiator, the distant cars, even the subtle creak of floorboards beneath my own movements. Suddenly, the unexpected happened again, a soft ding from the building's elevator. My stomach dropped. Was someone arriving? Could they hear? Could this moment unravel everything? My hands tightened around the clutch, and I felt the persona stretch taut across my body like a fragile second skin. The client noticed, her eyes flicking knowingly. "It's all part of the experience," she said lightly, almost teasingly. The words made my pulse spike further, and I realized the true challenge: maintaining the persona under constant, unpredictable interruptions. By the end of the segment, I had begun to understand that the night would push me further than I had ever imagined. Each unexpected knock, each subtle test, each reflective moment heightened the stakes. I was not merely cross-dressing. I was performing a complex, high-stakes balancing act between fear and exhilaration, exposure and control, vulnerability and empowerment. The climax had only begun, and every second that passed promised even more suspense, tension, and unexpected turns. I had just regained a fragile sense of control when the apartment doorbell rang sharply, piercing the charged air. My heart lurched violently. The client raised a brow, silently observing my reaction. This was no rehearsal. Every second was real, and now the night's tension had escalated to a new level. I took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing my hands to remain steady over the clutch, heels clicking softly as I approached the door. Peeking through the peephole, my stomach dropped. It wasn't a stranger this time. It was Isabella. My mind raced, 1,000 thoughts colliding at once. She wasn't supposed to return until later, yet here she was, standing with her keys in hand, casual yet suspicious. A bead of sweat ran down my temple as I realized the stakes had risen beyond anything I had imagined. If she saw me now, dressed in heels, makeup perfect, wig in place, everything, my secret, my experiment, my persona could be exposed in an instant. I stepped back, clutch pressed tightly to my chest, trying to project calm. "Stay calm," I whispered to myself. The client noticed the sudden shift in my demeanor, and her faint smile hinted that she understood the unspoken tension. "Do you want me to handle this?" she asked softly, voice smooth, measured. I shook my head subtly. This was my challenge, my test, and I had to navigate it myself. I moved to the door, heels clicking lightly but firmly, and opened it just enough to peek outside. Isabella's eyes met mine, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to pause. She frowned slightly, tilting her head in that familiar way that meant she sensed something was off. My pulse raced, my thoughts scrambling for a believable explanation. I smiled, a soft, casual tilt of the head, and said lightly, "Hey, Isabella. I didn't expect you back so early." Her eyes narrowed, scanning me from head to toe. "Really? What are you wearing?" The words weren't accusatory, but they carried a weight that sent a jolt through me. I forced a light laugh, attempting casual nonchalance. Just trying something new." "It's a project," I said vaguely, hoping the ambiguity would suffice. Every muscle in my body tensed. The persona and Jake coexisted in a tightrope balance, and one slip could unravel everything. The client moved silently to a corner, observing, her presence a strange comfort amidst the chaos. I could feel my nerves screaming at me, yet I forced my movements to remain deliberate and controlled. Isabella stepped closer, her gaze sharp, examining my makeup, the wig, the outfit. I held my breath, gripping the clutch, my heart hammering like a drumbeat in my chest. Then, unexpectedly, Isabella's frown softened into something else, a mixture of curiosity and amusement. "You really went all out," she said slowly. My body relaxed slightly, but I remained tense, unsure whether to trust her reaction. The client whispered lightly, "Good. Keep it natural, just like that," and I allowed the persona to fully take the lead, letting the tension guide my subtle gestures, controlled laughter, and poised movements. As Isabella lingered, small talk began, a test of improvisation under pressure. Each word, each gesture, each glance required precise calculation. The adrenaline made my senses hyper-aware. The faint scent of her perfume, the soft rustle of fabric, the subtle shift of weight in her heels. Every detail was magnified, intensifying the suspense. I responded smoothly, laughing lightly, tilting my head, letting my body language project casual elegance, yet inside, the storm of fear and exhilaration churned violently. Then came the ultimate twist. The elevator dinged again, and another familiar voice echoed from the hall. A neighbor I hadn't expected stepped inside, invited by Isabella to join her casually. My stomach sank. Now, not only was Isabella observing me, but an outsider, someone who knew me in my usual life, could see this transformation. The persona I had built for weeks faced a new, unanticipated scrutiny, and the suspense became almost unbearable. I forced myself to breathe slowly, forcing calm into my movements. Every gesture, every smile, every tilt of the head had to be perfect, natural, and convincing. The persona I had rehearsed in private had to survive real-world chaos, unexpected visitors, and the unrelenting observation of two people simultaneously. My pulse roared in my ears, adrenaline coursing through me, every nerve firing. The night had transformed from an experiment into a battlefield of identity, performance, and control. By the end of the segment, the stakes were higher than ever. My secret, my persona, and my composure were under intense, multifaceted pressure. The suspense had peaked, the obstacles compounded, and the emotional intensity stretched to the breaking point. Every movement and decision mattered, and I realized that the night would demand everything I had prepared, and then some. The climax was in full force, and nothing could have prepared me for the twists yet to come. The room felt impossibly small, each breath thick with tension. Isabella's eyes never left me, and the neighbor's presence added another layer of scrutiny that made my skin crawl. My hands trembled slightly, clutching the bag I had brought, the weight grounding me even as my pulse raced. Every movement had to be precise, every word measured. I felt the persona stretch taut across my body, balancing perfectly atop the fragile wire of composure, with Jake, the man behind the mask, lurking dangerously close to exposure. The neighbor smiled innocently, chatting casually with Isabella, unaware of the storm unfolding behind the polished exterior. I forced a polite laugh, tilting my head gracefully, letting the persona lead. My voice, practiced and higher-pitched, carried softly over the conversation, answering questions about my project, without hesitation. Each syllable felt like stepping over a precipice, every gesture a delicate negotiation between fear and performance. The suspense coiled tightly around me, my nerves straining like taut strings ready to snap. Then, as if the night weren't intense enough, Isabella's eyes narrowed slightly, a subtle sign that she had begun to suspect more than I had admitted. "I have to ask," she began, her tone calm but penetrating, "how far does this go? Is this just for fun, or is it something more?" The words sliced through me. How could I explain the complexity, the thrill, the secret yearning, without revealing everything? I hesitated, feeling my cheeks flush, and answered cautiously, "It's part of exploring different sides of myself. I enjoy the artistry, the challenge, and the freedom it gives." Her gaze sharpened, almost dissecting me, and I felt the weight of exposure settle heavily on my shoulders. The neighbor glanced at me curiously, sensing the tension without understanding its depth. My hands gripped the clutch tightly, nails digging into the leather as I forced a smile, hoping it appeared casual, effortless. Inside, my heart raced, fear mingling with a thrilling pulse of adrenaline. Every instinct screamed to flee, to collapse the performance, but I held firm, letting the persona maintain control. Then disaster struck in a subtle but crushing way. A sudden movement, a soft rustle of fabric, my heel catching on the edge of the rug, sent a tiny shiver of panic racing through me. The client's eyes flicked down for the briefest moment, and I could feel my face heat instantly. I shifted my weight carefully, correcting the stumble without breaking character. My body was acutely aware of every imperfection, every potential flaw, and the suspense thickened like fog. Each second stretched, elastic, as I fought to maintain the illusion under layers of pressure, observation, and fear of exposure. Isabella leaned forward slightly, her gaze sharp and searching. "You're handling this very well," she said slowly, a hint of amusement hiding behind her words. But there was a subtle edge in her tone, a whisper of suspicion that kept me on alert. The adrenaline coursing through me was almost painful, my muscles tense, heart hammering, and yet the thrill, the intoxicating mix of fear and excitement, pushed me onward. I moved to the seating area with a smooth, deliberate motion, crossing my legs carefully, adjusting the clutch, and keeping my voice even as the neighbor asked a casual question about the project. The room seemed to shrink further, every sound amplified, the soft hum of the radiator, the faint echo of footsteps in the hallway, the gentle rustle of the client's clothing. Every detail was a potential threat, every glance a subtle test. My mind raced with strategies: how to maintain composure, how to redirect attention, how to prevent a slip that could unravel everything. The persona was strong, but the pressure was relentless. I realized that the night had become a battle, not of identity versus performance, but of control versus chaos. Then came the ultimate challenge. The client moved closer, lowering her voice, almost a whisper. "I want to see you under pressure. Respond to this naturally. Imagine someone important arriving unexpectedly." My chest tightened. My stomach lurched as the image of Isabella walking toward the hallway replayed in my mind. The neighbor's innocent chatter continued, oblivious to the storm unfolding. I forced my hands to steady, keeping the clutch in place, voice soft but controlled. The persona responded, poised, confident, and casual. But inside, I was teetering on the edge of panic. The room seemed to contract further, suspense thickening with every second. Every gesture, every word, every breath became a test of endurance, composure, and authenticity. I realized that the persona and Jake were no longer separate. They were intertwined in a delicate balance that could shatter at any moment. My body trembled slightly, my pulse a drumbeat of fear and exhilaration, but I maintained the calm exterior. The night had pushed me beyond rehearsals, beyond preparation, into the realm where performance and reality collided. By the end of this segment, the suspense was nearly unbearable. The combination of unexpected visitors, subtle tests, and relentless observation had driven the tension to its peak. My secret, my identity, my composure, all were under threat, and every moment demanded absolute control. The climax was reaching its zenith, and the next part would push me even further, forcing me to confront the ultimate challenge: exposure, vulnerability, and the possibility of failure. The apartment was a pressure cooker. My heart raced like a drumbeat, every nerve screaming as I balanced on the razor's edge between composure and exposure. Isabella and the neighbor watched me, two sets of eyes analyzing every gesture, every word. My hands gripped the clutch tightly, knuckles white, and I forced a calm smile. The persona I had built, the elegant, poised version of myself, was under siege, tested to the limits of endurance. Then it happened. The elevator dinged again. A figure appeared in the hallway, someone completely unexpected. My best friend, the one person who knew Jake, but had never seen the persona. My chest tightened so sharply, I thought I might collapse. The persona had survived interruptions, scrutiny, and subtle challenges, but now, someone who could instantly recognize me stood at the threshold. My pulse skyrocketed. One glance, one word, and everything would unravel. I froze for a heartbeat, gripping the clutch, muscles taut, but instinct and preparation took over. I forced a graceful step forward, voice soft but natural. "Hey, didn't expect you so soon." The words came smoothly, casual, but inside I felt the chaos of fear and exhilaration battling for control. The persona had to hold, yet Jake, the real me, was trembling beneath the surface, aware that a single misstep could destroy everything. My best friend's brow arched. "Wow, you look different," he said slowly, almost teasing. My stomach dropped. Different? That one word carried the weight of potential exposure. I smiled lightly, letting the persona respond. "Trying something new?" I said, tilting my head gracefully. My voice, higher-pitched and smooth, carried the practiced confidence, but every second stretched as his gaze flicked over my outfit, my makeup, the wig. The suspense was unbearable. Isabella observed silently, her lips curling into a faint smile, and the neighbor looked on, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air. Every breath I took felt amplified, every movement hypervisible. Then, a subtle slip, my heel caught the edge of the rug, just enough to make me stumble slightly. My hand shot to steady myself, clutch pressed tightly, and I felt a wave of panic threaten to break the carefully maintained illusion. My best friend stepped closer, eyes narrowing, trying to process what he was seeing. I forced a calm laugh, voice smooth. I've been experimenting with style. It's fun to change things up. The persona took full control, body poised, movements deliberate, gestures fluid. I could feel Jake's panic coiled beneath the surface, heart racing, palms clammy, mind scrambling to maintain control. The suspense reached an almost unbearable peak. Then came the final test. Isabella leaned forward slightly, voice low and measured. I need to see how you handle pressure. Respond honestly. What would you do if someone discovered this? My chest tightened further, and I realized the ultimate stakes had arrived. Exposure was imminent. Every muscle in my body tensed as I processed the question, weighing words carefully, balancing honesty with deception. My mind raced. Should I reveal, conceal, or deflect? Each option carried potential disaster. I exhaled slowly, forcing calm, letting the persona guide me. I'd adapt, I said carefully, tilting my head, eyes steady. I'd keep going. I enjoy this too much to let fear take over. The words, though rehearsed, carried raw truth beneath the mask. My best friend's eyes widened slightly, processing, while Isabella's faint smile deepened. The neighbor, still unaware, continued chatting lightly, adding a surreal contrast to the high-stakes tension. Suddenly, a small disaster. A strand of the wig slipped forward, brushing my cheek. I reached up instinctively to correct it, and the slight movement drew the attention of both Isabella and my best friend. The world seemed to slow. My pulse roared in my ears, every sense heightened, as I maneuvered with careful precision to restore the illusion. The suspense was nearly unbearable. One wrong motion, one slip of composure, and everything would unravel. But somehow, through every heartbeat, every trembling step, the persona held. The client, ever observant, gave a subtle nod of approval, her eyes glinting with satisfaction. Isabella's gaze softened, curiosity mixing with amusement, while my best friend looked bewildered, intrigued, and perhaps a little suspicious. The night had pushed me beyond anything I had anticipated: emotional vulnerability, physical tension, and the raw fear of exposure. As the final moments of the segment drew to a close, I realized the night's suspense was far from over. The persona had survived, but the stakes had escalated to a new level. Every observer had glimpsed a truth hidden beneath the carefully constructed mask. My heart raced, adrenaline still coursing, as I understood the reality. The challenge wasn't over. The next moment, the next glance, could expose me completely, or cement the illusion in a way that even I hadn't imagined. And then, as I stood poised, clutch in hand, heels steady, wig perfectly in place, the doorbell rang once more. My stomach dropped. The suspense, the tension, the thrill, all intensified in that single, pregnant moment. Everything I had fought to maintain hung in the balance. The persona and Jake, fear and exhilaration, vulnerability and control, they coexisted in a fragile equilibrium. One more second, one more interruption, and the night would reach a tipping point. The climax had reached its zenith, the suspense unbearable, and the final twist looming. What would happen next? Would my secret survive? Would Isabella and my best friend accept the truth? Or would everything collapse? The answer waited beyond the door, in a single unresolved moment, leaving the night, and the audience, breathless, desperate for resolution. The apartment was silent for a heartbeat, the air thick with tension. My heels clicked faintly against the floor as I adjusted my posture, clutch tight in hand, wig perfectly in place. Every nerve was on fire, every muscle taut, and yet I had to project calm. Isabella's gaze lingered on me, sharp, calculating, and my best friend's eyes were wide with a mix of confusion and intrigue. I could feel the persona balancing delicately atop Jake's raw, anxious heartbeat, ready to collapse at any second. The doorbell rang again, each chime slicing through the silence like a knife. My stomach plummeted. Who else could it be? My mind raced with possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. The client, ever calm, glanced at me with that faint, knowing smile, as if silently urging me to continue holding the persona together no matter what. I swallowed hard, forcing my voice to remain steady. "I'll get it," I said lightly, though the tremor in my chest betrayed me. I approached the door with deliberate steps, each click of my heels echoing ominously. Peeking through the peephole, I froze. Standing there was a figure I never expected, Isabella's older sister, someone I had only met briefly before, yet her presence immediately sent a shiver down my spine. She had a subtle, knowing look, a smirk that hinted she might already suspect something. My mind spun, trying to calculate every possible reaction, every potential disaster. I opened the door slowly, a practiced smile plastered across my face. "Hey, what a surprise," I said lightly, tilting my head, forcing casual elegance. My heart thumped violently, palms clammy. The persona clung to me like a second skin, yet the terror of exposure threatened to unravel it in a single moment. Isabella's sister raised an eyebrow, her gaze sweeping over me, scanning from the wig down to the heels. "You're different," she said softly, the words loaded with ambiguity. I chuckled nervously, tucking a stray strand of hair behind my ear. "Just trying something new," I said, voice smooth yet carefully measured. But inside, chaos reigned. Each glance from her eyes, each faint smile, each subtle pause held the weight of judgment, threat, and discovery. The client stepped back into the shadows, watching intently, her satisfaction evident in the tiny curve of her lips. Isabella crossed her arms, a small frown creasing her brow. "Did you know she was coming?" she asked softly, though the tone carried suspicion. I shook my head slightly, careful not to break character. "No, this is unexpected," I replied smoothly, forcing casual warmth into my voice. The neighbor, still oblivious, chimed in about some mundane comment, adding a surreal contrast to the tension that had suddenly escalated to unbearable levels. My mind raced frantically, calculating every gesture, every word, every pause. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, and I realized that any single slip could destroy the persona entirely. I adjusted the clutch, crossed my legs with careful precision, and forced a light laugh, hoping it masked the storm of fear and exhilaration inside. The duality of Jake and the persona felt like a tightrope stretched over a chasm. One misstep, and it would all come crashing down. Then, the sister leaned slightly closer, her eyes glinting with amusement and suspicion. "You look convincing," she said softly, emphasizing the word in a way that sent chills down my spine. My pulse skyrocketed. Convincing. Not flawless, not perfect, but convincing enough that she might start asking questions, digging deeper, unraveling everything I had built. I forced a small nod, maintaining calm, letting the persona carry the weight of the moment. A sudden ding from the elevator echoed through the building, a reminder that more interruptions could arrive at any second. I felt the adrenaline spike anew, palms sweating, heart hammering. The suspense had become almost unbearable. Every breath, every movement, every glance was a test of endurance and control. My secret teetered on the edge of exposure, and the persona clung desperately to its fragile surface, holding Jake in check. Then, without warning, the sister stepped forward, tilting her head with a mischievous glint in her eyes. "I think I know a little more than you realize," she said, voice low, playful, but carrying an edge that made my stomach twist. My breath caught. Was she bluffing? Or had she really pieced together the truth? My mind raced, searching for any way to maintain composure, any line, any gesture that could keep the illusion intact. Isabella's expression shifted from curiosity to guarded concern, while the neighbor remained blissfully unaware, chatting casually in the background. The client's faint smile deepened, enjoying the tension, the drama, the high stakes. And I stood there, heels firmly planted, clutch in hand, wig perfectly adjusted, heart pounding, fully aware that one word, one glance, one motion could expose everything I had carefully constructed. The air seemed to vibrate with suspense, each heartbeat echoing the unspoken tension. My body shook slightly, but the persona forced a poised, confident posture. The duality of Jake and the persona balanced delicately, yet the slightest breeze, any unexpected comment or gesture, could tip the scales and send the illusion crashing down. The sister leaned in slightly closer, eyes locked on mine, a smirk playing on her lips. "Curious to see what happens next," she whispered, the words heavy with implication. And then, as the elevator dinged once more and the faint echo of approaching footsteps reached the hall, the room froze in a single, charged moment. Everything I had fought to maintain, identity, composure, secrecy, hung in the balance. The night, the suspense, the thrill of living a persona under pressure had brought me to the edge. And in that split second, with multiple observers, unexpected guests, and my secret hanging by a thread, I realized one truth. The story was far from over. One more interruption, one more glance, one more word, and everything would change. The screen of my life, the narrative of this one night, paused at the cliff's edge. The audience could only imagine. Would I survive exposure? Would the persona hold? Would Isabella, her sister, or even the neighbor unravel the truth? The suspense was unresolved, the tension unbearable, and the next chapter awaited, teasing, thrilling, and terrifying in equal measure.